All right, well, let me just start out with a brief introduction. My name is George Hay Kain III, and I'm here today on Tuesday night, November 25th, 2008, and I'm at the home of Anna M. Koval in Emigsville, or actually on the border between Emigsville and Manchester, and it's my pleasure to introduce and to talk to a long-time neighbor and friend of mine. So I've known you for probably 25 years. Do you prefer me to call you Ann, Annie, or Anna? What is your pleasure?
Well, let's talk about this place first.
Okay, that's fine.
I laid in there the clipping that talks about my dad buying the place.
Okay.
Rather than try to repeat all that, I'll give you. But I did think a little bit about, how it was when we bought it. And I can tell you that nobody had lived in any of the houses except we call the one that's across the road the brownstone.
Okay.
The
one that's next to the barn.
Right, the brownstone. Mr. Stonecipher, the caretaker, lived there, but there was nobody living in this house and nobody living in the big house. I'm told that years before there was an apartment too attached to that barn before it collapsed, and the chauffeur lived there, and I think Mr. Small had a gardener that might have lived up what we call a bathhouse. Okay. But when we moved here, and we took over, there was Mr. Small, John Small, sold many of much of the furniture that was in the big house that was worth anything to Paul Etland. Mm-hmm. And then left the rest for us to get rid of.
Sure.
Okay, so my dad and my husband start renovating these two houses because I had to move out here because my mother would not move out from York unless my husband and I agreed to take either the brownstone or this house.
Okay.
And at that time we had started a family, and my husband didn't want to live so near the highway. And anyway, this one had a possibility of a swimming pool. Oh. So we chose this one, and he came out first. He worked, but then on weekends he came out and got this one ready. And we moved in, it must have been the spring of 1950.
Okay.
And later, my parents weren't living there then. In other words, we and Mr. Stonecipher were the only people living here. And the way I'm pretty sure about that date is we were sleeping upstairs, and one night we heard this awful yelling, "Bud and Ann, wake up, the factory's on fire." And of course we ran to the windows, and it was my father and my brother trying to get my husband to come out because my husband was working then at American Acme. But all night they were dragging stuff in here from American Acme. Then that summer my parents moved out. So I know it had to be in the early 1950s.
Okay, well now just to back up a little bit here, what were your parents' names? What were your parents' names?
Oh, Carl Orman and Claudia.
All right, and you have several, or have had several brothers and sisters.
I have, and for a time, let me see, did they all live here? No, my two sisters, Carolyn and Susan, lived over with my parents.
Okay. And that would be the big house here.
The big house, that's right.
Estate.
And they, Ormans, lived in that house, and my youngest sister, Susan, was the last to live there in in 1999. We had to put her in a home because she was, they said dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, she had lost her mind, and it wasn't safe for her to live there anymore. In fact, if we wouldn't have by then had another caretaker who was a help, we'd have lost Sue in the house many times.
Okay. Now, your father was Carl, your mother was Claudia.
Oh, yeah.
Your older brother was William, or Bill, correct?
Well, I was the oldest.
Okay.
Then it was my brother, William, who later on ran American Acme.
Right.
Then was Carolyn,
okay,
and Elizabeth,
okay,
and Susan.
Susan was the youngest of the
Susie was the youngest, and she too worked at American Acme.
Now, what year were you born? What year were you born?
What year was I born?
Yes.
1918.
So you were...
I'm 90...
About 30... How old are you now?
90.
Okay.
I just was 90.
And
Don't remind me of that.
and so you were about 32 years old then when your family came out here.
Yes, because I must have been that old, because my daughter, who was already born, she was a toddler, was born on my 30th birthday.
Okay, all right. Now, your family had lived in York City before the family came out here.
My father and mother lived on 604 Madison Avenue.
Okay, and what was your father's business?
At that time it was, well, no, wait a minute. Before he had American Acme, it was American Toy and Novelty Works on Poplar Street.
Okay, and what did American Toy and Novelty manufacture?
I don't know, but I think they might have made sleds too. I don't have anything or any knowledge of what they made. I just know it was there, and they wanted to move.
Okay.
And somehow he heard about American Acme, that building there, and he bought it.
Okay.
And it was family owned. In other words, I showed you the stock.
Sure.
It was all made out. Almost all the stock was owned by the family. Almost all. There was a little bit extra, but.
Now, did your family come out from York to Emigsville at the same time as your father bought the building in Emigsville?
No, I think he was an American. I know he was an American Acme before we moved out here.
Okay. Now, what would be your street address here? What would your street address be considered? Shady Lane? The physical address.
Even those birds are annoying me. What?
Okay. What is the physical address of the house where we are? This is something or other Shady Lane?
This house?
Yes.
My address is 445, but then the one next to it is 475, and the brownstone is 4E.
Okay, and it's all on Shady Lane.
It's all Shady Lane.
Okay. Now, when you folks came here to this place, you decided to call it Orwood, I believe.
Oh, that came later. I think it was called Green Acres. But you asked me about a braille trail and all. Well, see what, and I have a whole folder of stuff in there about the braille trail. I have a copy I've been writing on here, but this Mr. Brett from the Northeastern High School had an ecology club, and he wanted a place for them to work outside. And, of course, my father and mother were horrified. A bunch of teenagers out here? No way. But they gave consent, and that's all in that folder. And then they decided it needed a new name, and it was Mr. Brett really and his club that said, why not call it OER after Orman and Wood, because it's mostly woods, and then we came on from there.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure it was called Green Acres before that.
Now, the family that lived here before you folks came was the Small family from York?
Yes, I think they only used this as one of their homes. They had several homes. I understand they had one in Florida, one in one of the big cities, but this was only their summer home.
Okay.
And they had at least 2 children. And one was John, and he didn't want to live here because his children would have to go to this one-room school that was up the road. And I guess the daughter wasn't married, but she lived in York. I don't know the exact.
So you think your father bought the property probably in early 1950?
I would imagine he bought. It might even say it on that article. Do you want to go and get it, George? Would that help you any?
Well, no, that's okay.
Right.
Well, we can do that.
I would if we were living here in 1950. Although I guess I would say it was 1949 or something like that.
Okay. Now, in what way is the place different today than when you folks first came here almost 60 years ago?
Well, let's see. I'll tell you what I did do. When we came here, I told you there was a stone cipher living in. Okay, he left because, it was really personal reasons. There was something that they understood that they were to be given the home, and my dad was not about to give him that house when he had paid for it. He never made that was Small's deal. So they moved, and then we had to get a new caretaker, and the caretakers have always lived in the brownstone. Mm-hmm. And but as I told you, nobody had lived in the 2 houses these two houses since I don't know how long, but they did a lot of the. This house had practically nothing in it, but the big house did have some nice big antiques,
sure.
And Paul Etline got those.
Now, when you refer to the two buildings, the big house is obviously the very large.
That's the big one. We call that the big house, and we call the brownstone that one, and mine's just mine.
Okay.
And there was an apartment. See, there was a big barn there. You remember?
Yes.
Well, somewhere I've written when the barn collapsed, and attached to that barn was an apartment.
Okay.
And when the barn collapsed, there was nobody living in that apartment at that time, so nobody was hurt. But after my folks lived here a while, they had. Do you know what DPs are?
Displaced person.
Yeah, they had two displaced persons from Poland. The woman was my mother's housekeeper, and the first man, I don't know what he did. But they stayed a while, and then they moved to Chicago, and we got another pair of displaced persons, and they too lived in the apartment, but they were much younger. And the man worked for American Acme, and the woman worked for my mother. So when they moved, then the apartment stood idle for a while, and Mr. Patterson, you may have run across
Was
Mr.
he the one who ran sort of nature tours?
Right? He lived in there.
Okay.
But he moved to Maine, and then it was sitting idle when the barn collapsed. That's what
I actually met Mr. Patterson in Maine because he was a friend of Wes Garrett, who runs Garrett Hydraulics here in New York.
Oh.
And so when the Boy Scouts went on a trip to Maine, we went to visit Mr. Patterson's.
I went up to visit him, too.
Okay.
And I hear from Mr. Patterson only at Christmas. Mm-hmm. But in the collection of things I have in there, he once wrote a very nice tribute about the estate out here. See, after he moved, he asked whether he could come back and camp out up in our tennis court while he was in York.
Sure.
And he writes there about, and he had it published in the paper, and we clipped it out.
Now, at its height, this should we say complex of buildings had a tennis court, a swimming pool, a pond.
I tell you, the swimming pool, George, I think that was added. Well, it wasn't actually a swimming pool when we moved here. It was a water reserve. See, there were springs. Whoa.
You're okay. You're okay.
There were springs up here
On the hill.
let's call it the northwest corner of the property, and they had a pipe that was sort of a reserve for water. I don't think the Smalls ever used it for a swimming pool. Mm-hmm. And then my father was so upset that my children I was taking them down the Cunnawalga to swim. He said, "Look, I'll pay for a swimming pool to be put up there if you'll never take those kids down the Cunnawalga again." And that's how the pool got started. That was not here when we bought it.
Okay.
It was a tennis court, though.
Okay. Now, what about the pond down that fronts on
Okay.
North Street?
Well, I haven't been down recently, but it's having hard times. And I know that Mr. Core has said that he would really like to dredge the whole thing and almost start over. It's filled in quite a bit, and it's not a really pretty pond anymore.
But back in the good old days, it was very attractive.
It was, my gosh. We ice skated down there. We had fishing parties. We had anything imaginable down there. In fact, it was down there. It was, and leading up from the pond, I don't know, George, whether you ever saw it, was a set of stone steps up to a building. And I understand when the Smalls lived here, they used to have orchestras there. And there was, when we came, there were shelves like where there was music stored. Oh. And then they also had an orchestra. When you go out from the big house and go south, there was a little what would you call it? A little place that an orchestra could sit. They had music there, and up by the tennis court, they have that big place that you could sit and watch the tennis players. That was all screened in.
Mm-hmm. Do you know approximately how many acres your father originally bought?
30-something, I think. It says in that article how many it was.
All right. Now tell us a little about American Acme. What did American Acme do?
American Acme was, from all my life, was a pain in the neck. No, what I tell you, when my father had it, probably I shouldn't talk this way about my dead brother, but when my father had it, he was a businessman. Anybody will tell you that Carl Orman made money from Atlas. He made money real estate. He knew what he was doing. My brother was not. But to please my father, my brother said he'd take over the factory. And as long as my father was guiding and Mr. Schultz was guiding, they were doing all right. But my brother just didn't do that well. And
but what were their products? What did they manufacture?
I think I have some postcards in there. I think when they started, they were sleds. But I believe before that time, other things were made there. And when you look at the postcards, you'll maybe agree with me. We started out with sleds. And I guess we're one of the two biggest sled makers in the eastern United States that I know about. And we were doing just fine until one year, of course, we sold the sleds to places like Sears and Roebuck and, those big outfits. Well, one year, one of them got a better bid, one of the big stores, and didn't buy from my father. And we took a beating that year because we had made all the sleds ahead, and we had no sale for them. And he said, never again. That's it. That's the sled business. Then we went in, oh gosh, we made gliders, we made porch swings.
I know you made park benches because I have some at my house.
They made park benches, and I know they did some work for Smithsonian one time. And then in the end, they were making mostly stuff a butcher block like that. This one they didn't make. My husband made that when he worked there. But toward the end, I know they were in the butcher block business because I had to help close that.
Sure, sure. Now, you were... You were a teacher, were you not?
I was a teacher when I was first married. Then I stopped to have some children, and then I went back and ended up teaching at Northeastern. But I taught, like Hannah Pinn and Edgar Fole Smith and that kind of stuff in New York. But then we came out here. I did teach at Northeastern, but as I say, I gave up my job because my brother thought my sister should stay home with my mother, and I went in there as the bookkeeper, or whatever you call the person that sits in the front desk
Sure.
and does all the dirty work.
Now, when we last talked, you told me that your father also had a cottage down at the river?
He had one on Brunner Island.
Okay.
I don't know how familiar you are with Brunner Island, but if you went all the way down to the island, we were the last one to the south. Okay. No, that wouldn't be, that would be south, wouldn't it?
Upstream or downstream?
Downstream.
Okay.
In other words, when you went down the island, you made a right.
Okay.
And at that time, you could drive straight down to almost to the water, and then there was a road going to the right, and we were the N1. We had the property that was on the point of the island.
And this was before they put in the big coal-fired electric
plant
down there?
We got flooded out twice, and then when my parents moved here, they sold that. They said they had enough of being flooded out. And anyway, this was convenient with American Acme here, and we're all living here.
Yeah, I mean, the plant has to be about a mile down the road at most.
Yeah.
Now, you had told me one time you and your brothers and sisters, though, had to row a boat to go get groceries and so forth when you were living at the cottage in the summer.
We did what?
Didn't you tell me that when you were living at the cottage in the summer when you were younger, that you had to get in a boat and row somewhere to get groceries?
Oh, we had to go across the Susquehanna.
Right, so you're rowing across the Susquehanna River.
Yeah, we rowed, and I don't know how well you can picture that, but Brunner's Island here, and then right out from there was another big island. So we had to row out, go that island down around the corner, and then go up along that side of the island, and then cross over to Bainbridge. And that was deep water over there on that side. This side was only one or two bad spots. Mm-hmm. We only had to rescue a couple people out there. Oh, I did that. Man, we had people hit on rocks or got trouble, and they'd call for help, and we had to go out and rescue them, yeah.
Now, was that before your family moved here, when you were much younger, or?
Yeah, because once my dad had bought this place, and that would be us too. It was before that. I'm trying to think. At that time, my husband came down and visited me. I'm trying to think whether I ever went down there after we were married. I don't think so. And I know that was 1945, so I know my husband visited us down there, but I don't know, he was my future husband then, and he came down. But then I think we moved on Carl Avenue. We bought their property of 17 Carl Avenue, my husband and I did.
Now, you went to college.
Oh, yeah, I'm an old Penn Stater. I'm Joe Paterno, Penn State.
And where did you meet your husband? Where did you meet your husband, Bernard?
Oh, golly, Ned. I hope he isn't taping it. Well, I tell you, I roomed with his sister all 4 years I was at college. And how did I meet his sister? They were from Waverly, New York. Because my father went to Penn State and talked to the dean and said, now look, my daughter doesn't drink, she doesn't smoke, blah, blah, blah. In the meantime, this girl's father was saying the same thing about her, so the dean put us together. And we hit it off right away. Well, she had brothers and sisters, and her name was Mary Rose. And right from the beginning, she had me that I was going to marry her older brother. Well, he died very suddenly in his young 20s. So right away she said, now you're going to marry my other brother, Bud. And she worked on this until finally it all came about. Now, that's a weird story. Her, Mary Rose's 2 sons have recently visited me, and they wanted to know, what about all this? What did you know about our mom? Well, that's just the way it was. She was determined, and I wrote to him a long time before I ever met him. And when he came to Penn State to see her right away, she had to see that I saw him. And my parents liked him a lot, too. And
now, at some point, he worked for American Acme, but then he also?
I tell you, my husband, when we were first married, worked for, he graduated as an aeronautical engineer. And he worked down near Trenton. And they moved their business to California. And he didn't want to move to California, and I didn't particularly want to with our families here in the East. And he was debating what to do, and my dad needed, someone like him. And so he said, well, come, you can work for me. Mm-hmm. And he became the plant manager. Okay. He was.
Now, you had indicated that very shortly after you came out here, there was a fire at the company at American Acme.
At American Acme.
Did that totally destroy the company, or was it just...
No, that was the night I told... That had to be in the early 1950s. That was the night that my father and my brother were standing out here calling for us to come. Mm-hmm. And as far as... we knew how it started. The employees were sitting on the stuffing that you put into gliders. You stuff the pillows or something. Mm-hmm. They'd spend their lunch breaks down there smoking, and they set fire to it, but they didn't realize that it smoldered until night. And then it all went up. Mm-hmm. And because there was a lot of paint, stored there, and although they saved, the majority of the building, but...
So it was just a temporary setback.
It was a big setback. Maybe, I don't know... No, I wouldn't say that was the downfall, but it was bad. It was scary more than anything else. But the firemen saved it. But it was just careless employees set it afire.
Now, the building that we're in, which you just simply call your home, I believe at one time had been a distillery?
It was a brewery.
Brewery. Can you tell us a little about that?
What?
Can you tell us a little bit about what you know about...
All I know is that's why it was designed this way. The farmers or the people that bought this stuff was brewed here, would back in, and they could back their trucks right back to the door. And there's a big spring in the cellar. Mm-hmm. So the work was done in the cellar. And we found, I think I might have it somewhere, bottles out here, and I think there's a plaque on the side of the building, there's supposed to be, where government used to come and inspect it.
Yeah, I saw the plaque when I was here last.
Hey, did you have a brewery at your house?
Yes, we had a distillery.
I thought they said most of the farmers around here had breweries.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, what time period was that?
Well, now, did William, your brother William, or Bill, did he ever marry and have children? Bill Orman, your brother?
He was married, so we never got to know her very well, but she died, and the stepdaughter married a man that was a florist. He's not from around here, and I haven't heard. I know her name was Barbie, but I don't know what became of her.
And Susan and Carolyn never married?
Susan never married. Carolyn never married. Elizabeth married Clarence Kuiper.
And she was she a teacher also? Your sister Elizabeth, was she a teacher also?
Yep.
And
so was her husband.
Okay, and they taught in the city schools, I believe? Yorkshire?
I believe, Elizabeth didn't teach very long. I thought she taught, I think she taught at Edgar Falls Smith, but I'm not sure. And I think Clarence he might have taught some classes at York College.
Okay. Now, how many children do you have?
How many do I have? I had 5, I have 4.
Okay, and who are the 4 that...
I have Judith, really. She's the one who lives down in Maryland. Mm-hmm. And then I have Carol, who's the one I talk to a lot about. She's my right-hand person. And then I have Carl, who lives in Colorado. And, of course, he's married and has children. And then I have John, and he's married and has 2 children.
Okay. So you've probably, I guess from the age of about 32, you lived the rest of your life here in this home. I'm sure you have lots of memories of this place.
Oh, my gosh. I said, I know I can't live forever, and I don't want to leave my kids with this mess of stuff I've stored up. So I've been going through it, and what was it I found the other day? Oh, it was a lot of that stuff. I was looking for stuff about this place, and I found that Orwood Trail, and I have a folder. I want Carol to look at it. They had, when they had the Nature Center up there, they had write-ups even up in Harrisburg papers. Mm-hmm. And one of them has a photograph of Carol, so I want to see that.
Now, living here, did you have a lot of interaction with Emigsville other than American Acme? I mean,
I couldn't have told you.
Or the bank, or...
I knew a few people. I knew I guess this gentleman knows there was a row of houses along where the post office is now in Emigsville. There was a row of houses. I knew Jack Fry that lived there because he worked for American Acme, and John Garber because he worked for American Acme. And I don't believe beyond that I knew a single person. I've thought and thought. Now, I've met people since, Janet Kahn, that I met out at the home. And but I did not know her. No, we had no... It seems odd, doesn't it, that we wouldn't, but...
Your own little estate here.
And as a reason I knew those 2 men is because they worked in American Acme. I think there were about 5 houses along there. Something like that.
What changes do you see in this area from 1950 when you came to now? You probably have seen a lot of change. Mm-hmm. At least a lot of things have probably changed in your experience living in this area. I mean, this is obviously much more populated.
Oh, it's horrible. It's all built up. I can remember, oh my gosh, when this whole thing was vacant, almost over to your house, and of course to the south of us. Now that big industrial park, I think it's called an industrial park, but you know what I'm referring to, the thing that's between, and then going up this way, it hasn't changed that much. If you go up Shady Lane, except for that trucking company that was put in there, and then if you cut off Shady Lane and go back further, now there's industries back there. But actually the big house that is now boarded up here, that was there. And coming on down, all those houses were there. Mm-hmm. And the Grothies lived there, and they still live there. But that part hasn't changed. It's just all around us.
Sure.
The building that's the trolley, the waiting room for the trolley?
Oh, they were for the little one was, the one that's closest to Manchester was where they stored the ice. They cut the ice off the pond, And I think that should be locked. It was, because we were afraid people would fall down in there. And the other one was a waiting room for the trolley. You're right. That went out there. And that toward the end we were locking too, because we found, one time we found 2 boys that had run away from home. They were hiding down there. And I know now Mr. Core is working on trying to get Shady Lane closed off. But, and I came across an article, so had the people that started the Nature Center.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't make it.
Yeah. Now, did the trolley...
There was some talk that I know Mr. Small owned land on the other side, that they were going to run some kind of a railroad track closer to the house, and he gave them money to keep it as far from the house as he could. Now, I had heard that he had a relationship. He owned the land and he gave it to him just so they'd keep it away from his house. Let me see. Because I know when we did the major shopping, my parents went all the way into York to the Central Market, and then there was a big grocery store right in that area, right on one of the corner blocks there. But they did their shopping in York.
It was it.
And Emigsville never did get a very big grocery store.
What kind of cars?
No.
Victory Gardens, coupons.
Well, see, at that time we lived in the city and we didn't have room for Victory Gardens. Somebody else asked me that, what I remembered about shopping in World War II. Didn't we have ration? Okay, I remember that. I remember my mother used to send me to the store when they announced, like, butter, they were going to have something, and I remember that you had to go to the Madison Avenue School to get your ration tickets. See, we lived right across from Madison Avenue School. Because somehow, I think it came to be, somebody asked how I got my name, and then why I was named Anna Marie. And then I knew it was because my Aunt Ann had died, my Aunt Anna Marie, and she had been helping people with, that was the time they had the diphtheria.
Okay.
And I remember that's right, my father wasn't allowed to come in the hospital. I was born, I was in the hospital at one, it's either King or Princess Street. There was an old hospital in there. And
York Hospital. Yeah. It's right at the creek, right?
Yeah, right. My nurse had to hold me up at the window, and my dad had to stand outside. He wasn't allowed to come in.
Okay.
But I don't remember that I was told.
Yeah, you were born in 1918, then, right? So there was a big influenza epidemic.
It was a flu or diphtheria or something.
Well, I think it was influenza, and there were large numbers of people that died.
Oh, yeah.
It was a major...
Now, this is really old. I was told this, too. I ran away when I was a kid and didn't run very far, and so did my son. Bud scolded him. He did something. Our car was parked down here, and I don't know whether Carl... I can't imagine he'd been so dumb as to jump on the field, but he got scolded. And Bud was very, very strict. He certainly didn't raise his kids like my children are raising theirs, I can tell you that. But Carl took off, and he ran down that way. And he eventually came back. You know, kids that run away often come back. I came back
too as a kid.
Huh?
I ran away too.
You did too. You know, my mom packed my suitcase. I threatened to run away. That's when we would go out in 1034 West Market. Yeah, we had a fight. And I said, I'm going to run away. She said, I'll help you pack. And she helped me pack a little suitcase. I got down to the corner and looked around, and I thought, what am I going to eat? I don't have any money. I went home.
Well, thanks very much.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure talking
Well,
with
listen,
you.
if you have questions, you're welcome to come back.